You had joined IMB in 1976.
Correct.
And before that, your early academic career, how did you get to being an academic? How did you come to IMB?
Okay. Yeah. I finished my PhD from Iowa State University, Ames, Iowa, and that was in 1974. And then I worked there for a couple of years as a staff economist. Then I was looking for a job in India. The university made me an offer in Ames, Iowa, but I decided that I have to come back to India. So frankly speaking, I did not apply to IIM Bangalore. I applied to Professor Jati Sengupta, who was my teacher, and at that time he was the director IIM Calcutta. And when I applied to Jati, he forwarded my application to Professor N.S. Ramaswamy, who was the director at IIM Bangalore, and wrote to me saying that I may want to look at IIM Bangalore as a possible option. Then, meanwhile, I had come back to India, and IIM Bangalore invited me for an interview, and I got selected. So I joined IIM Bangalore in August 1976. So that was the background.
Your early interest was in agriculture, rural development.
Yeah.
How does that mesh with your current?
So my basic basic degree was in agriculture. I am a BSc Agriculture, MSc in Agricultural Economics, and a PhD in Operations Research and Statistics. My dissertation was in agricultural economics, application of linear programming, spatial models. So in a sense, I was looking at myself as an agricultural expert. So when I applied to IIM Bangalore, I was recruited into the agricultural sector. Those days we had these different sectors. Basically we had the functional areas like quantitative methods, production, manufacturing, production operations management, then organizational behavior, finance, marketing, etc., etc. We also had the so-called applications in various sectors. We had things like agriculture, habitat, transport, energy, health, etc. So I was actually recruited into the agricultural sector. This was called Center for Agriculture and Rural Development, and internally we used to call them as agricultural sector.
This is a very important aspect. What I'm saying is that what we have structured in terms of disciplines today, there was a dual system which was operating initially.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about the public systems approach and vision at that point in time?
At that point in time, we had these basically management disciplines, basically marketing, finance, production operations management, etc., etc. Then the thinking was that we should develop the sectors where the application of interdisciplinary nature will take place. So this was also thought to be the kind of area where the management inputs had not gone in till then. So Professor Ramaswamy used to call them as the under-managed sectors. So this was agriculture is one, transport is another, energy is one more, etc., etc. So there was some kind of a idea of combining the management disciplines with the application area in the under-managed sectors. So that was the initial thinking.
Do you think that persisted, or why was this disbanded? Somewhere down the line that went?
Yeah, see, we were ahead of our times. So at that time we even started postgraduate program PGP in the sectors also. So we had specializations in the management disciplines, we had specialization in the different sectors. So we used to recruit students into PGP as specializing in agriculture, transport, energy, so on and so forth. Then somewhere along the line we found that we are not getting enough numbers in terms of the PGP applications into the sectors, and more important, the students were not getting the kind of placements in the right sectors. For example, if you look at agriculture, the placement has to be in government oriented or the NGO kind of sectors. So we're finding it a little difficult to place students in those sectors or in that kind of jobs. Sectors like energy were okay because the students were able to go to companies like NTPC or BHEL. But many other sectors like habitat, health, agriculture were finding it difficult to place them. There was kind of a dual specialization for these students. In addition to specializing in a sector, they could specialize in one of the management disciplines also. So finally, they were ending up as a marketing person or a finance person in one of the other private sector companies. Then we started kind of reviewing and looking into it, trying to find out what are we really doing in terms of these sectors, especially with respect to the postgraduate program students. So somewhere along the line we decided that we should not have this kind of a specialization in PGP, but maybe we should persist on a specialization in public systems group. So around that time we decided to disband the sectors but create a separate group called the public systems group. That's how the public systems group evolved.
So all these sectors were kind of combined
together,
and brought under this head.
Right.
So public systems was a discipline like QMIS and
yes, it was public systems group was later converted into a management area like economics and social sciences or marketing or finance.
Oh.
So it was turned into or transformed into a separate area. Also, the faculty members who were recruited into these sectors, suddenly they found that they did not have the kind of core courses that were there earlier with the sectors, but now with the disbanding of the sectors, they did not have these core courses available for them to teach. So some of us, like myself, Professor Shyamal Roy, Professor Ranganathan, we looked at our other kind of specialization and moved into those areas. That's how I moved into quantitative methods area, Shyamal moved into economics area, Ranganathan also moved into economics area. So we kind of managed to find our own roles within the mainstream areas of the institute. Some people decided to stay with the public systems, so they continued with the public systems. So some of us had this dual role somewhere along the line. We were part of the public systems as well as the management discipline areas. So that's how it happened.
Okay, so that's in terms of the first 15-20 years of IMB, how would you view the evolution and the vision articulated by the directors and the chairman at that time?
Okay. When we started off, I joined in 1976. Institute started in 1973, inaugurated by the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. The first batch came in 1974. They graduated in 1976. I joined just after the graduation of the first batch. At that time, the emphasis was more on the so-called sectoral areas. There was also emphasis on the public sector companies. So the first batch, the students were predominantly drawn from the public sector. They also were placed back into the public sector. So that was the initial philosophy. That's how Professor Ramaswamy looked at the institute, saying that the institute should contribute more towards the undermanaged sectors as well as the public sector in the country. He also, at that time, he also felt that there was no need for us to collaborate with any of the foreign institutions. Let me just go back and spend some time on that. When Ahmedabad started, they had a collaboration with Harvard University. Similarly, when Calcutta started, they had a collaboration with Sloan School in MIT. When IIM Bangalore got started, we felt that we had enough expertise in the management field within the country, so we don't have to look towards any of the outside organizations. So that's how IIM Bangalore started, without any collaboration with any of the foreign institutions. But at the same time, it also evolved that we had academic relationships with a lot of other universities, which is even today, it's continuing. And similarly, Professor Ramaswamy, his contribution, in my opinion, to the institute is his vision about the institute. He looked at the campus, he got the campus at the right side of the city, south, because I remember we were offered 2-3 different plots of land in other parts of the city, but finally we decided to come to the south, Bannerghatta Road. Also, it was kind of his vision, the way the campus looks today, the greenery, the buildings, so on and so forth. He was the one who brought in the architect. Doshi was our main architect at that time. So his contribution was more or less the development of the campus. I think also his major contribution was starting the culture in the institute, saying that the faculty is the supreme in the institute. So he started the culture where all the decisions are taken by the faculty meeting decisions who are finally final in nature. So everything is done decided by the faculty. So that was his contribution at that time. Unfortunately, during his period, we got into problems with respect to the regionalism within the institute. And another unfortunate thing that happened was the chairman, he was the governor of Karnataka state. He tried to run a separate power center. So there were instances where the institute staff, faculty, employees used to go to the governor, and the governor tried to run the institute from long distance. It created issues in terms of HR, industrial relations. We had a very powerful employee union, and the institute had problems running even on a day-to-day basis. Then Professor Joe Philip came in as the director. I think his contribution was getting the industrial relations into the institute into a peaceful level. He managed the employees union. He brought the so-called industrial peace into the institute. So that was very good for Professor K.R.S. Murthy, because when he came in, took over from Joe Philip, he had the kind of peace in the institute, and he got the support from the faculty. So he could concentrate on the academic excellence of the institute. So Professor K.R.S. Murthy, I think his contribution was bringing the institute to a high level of academic excellence, both in terms of programs as well as other activities. Then I think M.R. Rao took over as the director, and he brought us to the #1 rank in the country. We became #1 management institute in the country on Business Today rankings, and he started putting emphasis on the research. So the research was getting pushed, but still we were more or less concentrating on teaching. The other thing that M.R. Rao has done is expand our footprint in the international level. He started the student exchange programs, international collaborations, started promoting executive education in collaboration with other institutes abroad. And then of course, Professor Apte came in. APTE continued the emphasis on research, continued the emphasis on teaching, continued the emphasis on the internationalization. After APTE, Professor Pankaj Chadha came in, and I think his contribution is strengthening, number one, our international footprint. He got the accreditation from the European EQUIS, European agency. All said and done, in my opinion, this personal opinion, EQUIS accreditation does nothing to us in terms of either the number of PGP applications we invite or anything else. We continue to get the same number of PGP applications, we continue to get the top cream towards the PGP students. But at the same time, EQUIS accreditation has done it gave us a viewpoint from outside. It helps us to, it got somebody from outside to look at the institute, tell us which are our strengths, which are our weaknesses. So the EQUIS accreditation helped us to strengthen our own strengths, also what we need to do to convert our weaknesses into strengths. I think that was the biggest contribution of Professor Pankaj Chandra. So that's the contribution of each of the directors that I see.
Okay. I'd like to ask you about the liberalization of India and the influences to the growth of IMB, Bangalore as a location and the IT sector dimension. How do you think all of these factors have played into the growth of, because if you say we were in terms of historic thing, the third IMB, but I think 100% we are acknowledged to be
number one, one or two.
It depends on perception. So how do you think all these factors have come together to help us?
Being in Bangalore actually helped us quite a bit. The city's ambience and the liberalization put Bangalore straight on the international map. In addition, Bangalore became the, what should I say, the Silicon Valley of India. The IT sector took off from Bangalore. Partly because of the kind of importance that Karnataka government has given to IT, or maybe like many people say, government never bothered to control IT, so it took off. We also as an institute took advantage of our location in Bangalore. For example, we started the PGSCM program with support from the IT industry. The city's ambience, its culture, the education facilities available attracted probably the best faculty from anywhere in the world. And that's how we got probably one of the best faculty groups in India among all IIMs. Then the liberalization helped us in a different way. With the liberalization, this private sector opened up. Interestingly, we also moved our emphasis from the public sector orientation to general economy orientation around the same time. So it all worked out as a happy accident, if you want to put it like that. The liberalization, our moving from the public sector orientation to general economy, free market orientation, the IT, our moving into PGSCM, etc., etc. So the location also helped us quite a bit.
What significant events can you recall of IMB's history over the years?
Okay. Lot of them. I don't know. I mean, almost each year we have something or other among the last almost 37 years that I have been around. Significantly, I think the first one was moving out of the public sector or the sectoral orientation into the free market economy. First one. The seats were sown during the time of Professor N.S. Ramaswamy, but Professor N.S. Ramaswamy was so involved with the public sector sectoral orientation, he just couldn't accept the fact that all these have to be given up. But it was left to Professor Philip. He brought all these sectors into one single entity as Public Systems Group, and moved the PGP away from the public sector orientation into the free economy orientation. That was one of the initial milestones. Another milestone, if I can say, is the government's idea of taking the not supporting the institute financially through budgetary allocation. I think it started in 1991 or 92, where the government came back and said we are having something called a revised pattern of funding for all IIMs and IITs. And they said we will not give you full budgetary support anymore. You are expected to generate your own resources. As an incentive to generate our own resources, they said they are going to freeze the budgetary sanction at the average level of the previous 5 years, which means we are actually getting much less than what we were getting till then. I think by 1997, within about 5 years or so, we were able to generate all our so-called non-planned budget. And we started putting significant amounts of money into the endowment. Like I said, I don't think the government expected us to reach that level. So that was another important milestone, which actually made us look into the future and increase our activity level, also become completely market oriented. That is how our emphasis towards executive education programs increased quite a bit. And we also moved into floating other programs. PJCM is one example. The EPGP is another example. So we moved into a lot of other activities because of that. So in a sense, I think government did us a great favor in freezing our budget initially, then stopping the entire budgetary grant at a later date.
So this was a very important
milestone
aspect, in the sense that it would have been a common approach to all the IIMs at that point in time.
Yes, it was common approach to all IIMs and IITs at that point in time, except IIM Lucknow. So when this was started, I think we had only 4 IIMs, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Calcutta and Lucknow. Maybe Indore and Calicut just got started at that time. The government's initial idea was that the 3 older IIMs should be able to generate their own resources. They wanted to continue with the government grants for Lucknow, Indore and Calicut. So among all the IITs and IIMs, I think all the 3 IIMs managed to become self-sufficient. I think now Lucknow is on its way.
But the important thing is that both Ahmedabad and Calcutta had a head start of another 10 years.
Yes, they had a head start of 10 years.
So they had a longer duration of government support. Whereas if you can say that this...
you know, when this revised pattern of funding came in 1991, both Ahmedabad and Calcutta had about 10 years head start compared to us, number one. Something else happened. In 1991, we were still growing. So basically, when they took the average of the previous 5 years, we were at a greater disadvantage because it was pegged almost 2 to 3 years budget earlier to that date, 1991 date. Whereas Ahmedabad and Calcutta, their activity level more or less came to a kind of a stationary state. So the gap between their budgetary requirement and the amount at which the budget got frozen by the institute, the gap was much higher for IIM Bangalore as compared to Ahmedabad and Calcutta. So we had to strive and we had to struggle a little more. But I think our faculty rose to the occasion. It's all the faculty contribution to bring the resources. And it also made faculty as well as the institute to look into the kind of activities which are more relevant to the clients outside world. Of course, we also had the advantage. We could slowly increase our tuition fees. I remember before the revised pattern of funding, the tuition fee used to be something like about 500 rupees per annum. Unbelievable. It's free education for all practical purposes. So we had to struggle a little bit more, but I think that's made a lot of difference to the institute. That was a major milestone in the history of the institute. Then I think the other couple of milestones are in terms of our floating PGSEM, floating of the PGPPM, and of course we put a lot of emphasis on corporate partnership with respect to our executive education. So we had excellent partners. We had Siemens to start with. We had Reliance Industries. We had ABB. We had a whole series of India's who is who corporate sector coming to us as corporate partners. So that gave a completely different push to the executive education. So that was another milestone.
In terms of the administration, any comments about how things have changed over the years?
Oh yeah. No, not only the administration, even the faculty workload got changed quite a bit. Okay. In the earlier days, the faculty had, I think, we were concentrating more on teaching, and research was not on the top of the agenda. We were also kind of had enough free time. I remember when I joined, I had enough free time to attend most of the MDPs at that time. I used to sit in the classes of the so-called star faculty, whichever course they were teaching. I even remember I sat through the entire 33 sessions of Professor Ramesh Mehta's strategy class because I wanted to understand how the strategy topic was taught to the PGP students. So, sitting through those sessions, lectures was of a great help for me. Helped me in my teaching, helped me in creating my own courses. That was a great help. Today the faculty is so busy with the activities, I doubt if anybody can have that kind of a luxury of that kind of free time. Similarly, the administration, there was a time when, I think this was year 2000 or maybe 1998, 99, 2000, during those 3 years, we have offered a major voluntary retirement scheme, and if I remember correctly, we brought the numbers down in the administration by about 100. So we had, I think, about 300 numbers in administration before the voluntary retirement scheme. It came down to less than 200. And it's very interesting that the so-called 200 people were able to manage the workload of so-called 300 people. And the best part I enjoyed most is none of the administration ever complained about the increase in the workload. That was another milestone in that sense. That was a big change. Huge transition. Yeah. And of course, leaner, more efficient, and just to give you an idea, we had the luxury of having one executive assistant for 2 faculty members. Now, we have one executive assistant for 8 to 10 faculty members for the entire floor. I think, of course, what contributed to this was the use of the information technology. So that also made a lot of difference. And of course, the institute also provided a lot of infrastructure support. So that's how we manage the reduced numbers in the administration. And the most interesting part of this so-called voluntary retirement scheme was we could identify people by name and convince them that they should go on the voluntary retirement scheme without any hassle. And I think the entire credit goes to Professor Kalyani Gandhi, who was the Dean Administration at that time. She managed this entire voluntary retirement scheme in a most effective way, and everybody was happy. Even people who left the institute, they were happy to leave the institute, and for some of them, I remember Kalyani found alternate jobs for them. That was fantastic.
Outplacement, what we call...
Yes, outplacement. Yeah, she did that. She managed that.
So HR has always been
yes, major strength. Yeah, and she actually, practiced it.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of the overall structure, you have the director, and then in our case we have a dean academic and dean administration.
Yeah.
Has this always been the pattern, or?
No. The pattern used to be, initially when I joined or when the institute got started, we had the director supported by two deans. One dean is called Dean Research and another dean is called Dean Programs. So the Dean Research used to look after the research activities as well as the faculty related activities. Dean Programs used to look after the programs like PGP, FPM, etc. So yeah, completely different. Then somewhere along the line, I think 76 or so, we created another position which is almost equivalent to the dean's position. We call the position as faculty secretary. Basically, he is supposed to look after all the activities relating to faculty, including faculty recruitment. So that was the initial structure. So somewhere along the line, the faculty secretary position disappeared, and then we had a couple more dean's positions added. So we had Dean Administration added to the list. Then we also had the Campus Development Chairperson, who is also given the dean's rank. So at one time we had equivalent of 4 dean's positions. Then it got changed to Dean Academic only. At the time it was actually only 1 dean. So we had a situation where, I think this happened during Professor K.R.S. Murthy's time. We had the director and only 1 dean. Same thing continued in M.R. Rao's time. So M.R. Rao was the director, I was the dean at that time. Then when we had this voluntary retirement scheme coming up, then we decided that we need somebody in a dean's position so that this can be handled more effectively. So that's how we created the position of Dean OD, Organizational Development. So we still call it as Dean Administration, but the official nomenclature given at that time was Dean Organizational Development. Kalyani was the first Dean OD. I was the Dean Academic at that time. So that is still continuing as of now. So this was the kind of structure. The board membership was as earlier. You had the 2 faculty members on the board, etc., etc.
You have interacted a lot with Ahmedabad and with Calcutta. In what way, in the internal workings, is IMB different or distinctive?
I would say IMB is very, very distinct. I think basically I should not say that. Okay, I think each institute, each IMB is very, very distinct in its own way.
Which are the characteristics?
Yeah, one of the major characteristics of IMB is, number one, of course, on all the 3 institutes, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Calcutta, I think the faculty is considered to be the supreme. But at the same time, I think Calcutta faculty is more on the, what should I say, revolutionary type or more radical in nature. They take this concept of supremacy to the extreme. IMB the way I think we operate is more like it is settled, but we still make sure that whatever the faculty wants or whatever the faculty decides gets carried through. This more or less has become, in a sense, very, very evident when we had this tiff with the HRD ministry. During Mr. Murali Manohar Joshi's time, there was enough efforts from the ministry to control the IIMs. And the 3 IIMs went in 3 different ways. I think Calcutta went in a radical way. The faculty started passing resolutions and almost trying to take up a fight with the ministry. Ahmedabad did it in a different way, possibly because I think Narayan Murthy was their chairman at that time. He had a different way of handling this. IMB was trying to do it in a more peaceful way, but still never succumbed to any of the pressures from the government. I think the only institute which succumbed to the pressures was IIM Lucknow. So that kind of brought out the way each institute had its own internal culture. So possibly this is the way the institute started, the institutes grew up, and the kind of culture that got imbibed into the institute over the period of their existence.
We all like to think we have a unique and different, distinct culture, and yet it's a very, very difficult word in terms of, and yet when you come down to it, the faculty, students, everybody wants to hold on to the cultural aspect. What could be the dimensions of the IMB culture? Again, not in comparison, but what is special to us?
It's very difficult to say. It's very difficult to say because I never worked in any other place other than IIM Bangalore in India. Okay, so I don't really know what the other cultures are. Okay.
What made you stay here for so long?
Yeah. No, that's because one thing I always liked about IIM Bangalore is nobody tells you what you have to do or what you should do. All the directors that I have worked with, nobody ever told me what I need to do or what I should do. Even the deans never told me what I should do. This is, I think, very, very important part of our culture. I remember one instance in a faculty meeting. This was a faculty meeting chaired by Professor Joe Philip, and Professor Vaidyanathan was the PGP chairperson. And at the beginning of the faculty meeting, this was just before the convocation. So at the beginning of the faculty meeting, Vaidi described the process of the grades and the grade sheet printing, etc., 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 and requested faculty to send in their 6th term grades by such and such date, so that the PGP office can get the grade sheets ready for the convocation. Of course, also they have to decide who is eligible to graduate, etc., 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 all those things. So when he made this announcement and made a request to the faculty, nobody said anything, everybody kept quiet. Then we went through the faculty meeting. At the end of the faculty meeting, Professor Joe Philip made a request again, requesting the faculty to send the grades by such and such date. I remember it was Professor Nagabhushana, Professor Vijay Sarathi. Professor Vijay Sarathi, he raised his hand and asked the director, Joe Philip, what would you do if I don't send my grades by that date? And Professor Philip thought for a couple of seconds and said, I would request you again. I think that describes the best part. And the best part really is, Professor Vijay Sarathi responded saying that, I'll make sure that my grades will be in before anybody else's. that describes the relationship between the faculty and the so-called academic administration. You cannot dictate to the faculty what they have to do or what they should do, but at the same time faculty takes it on their own to make sure that they deliver what they have to deliver. So I think that's the culture. That describes the actual culture the best, that one incident. Yeah.
Directionally, if you have to keep on innovating.
Correct. And then make it happen. Make it happen. Yeah, and on last thing I would like to say, people keep asking me, if you are given another opportunity, way back, let's say 1976, would you have still joined IIM Bangalore? Now I would say yes, I would have still joined IIM Bangalore. I can say this, when I joined in 1976, I was not so sure. Not so sure. Couple of things, I was not sure I'll continue with the institute. I was also not sure, probably I'll maybe go back to the US. There were still few job offers pending at that time. But for various reasons I stayed back, and I'm very happy that I stayed back. These 40 years had been probably the best years of my life, my family members' lives. So I wouldn't have it any other way.
Pioneer actually, because the institute was new at that time.
Yeah, correct. We just started. Yeah. And it's a big change from the institute, from what it was starting in 33 Langford Road in the St. Joseph's College. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.